Hello everyone, Davey here with my review of the season finale for Gotham's first season, and this is the deciding review because at the end of this I'm going to make my decision as to whether or not I'm going to continue to do episodic reviews on Gotham when season 2 rolls around, because it's been a tough season. Okay, Gotham was one of the shows that I'm like, okay, I'm holding. I have a good sense of anticipation, but at the same time, I'm reserving judgment because there's a couple of things that I saw in those trailers and those promos, especially when I went to Comic-Con last year and I saw some of the promotional material, like the posters and all that, and I'm like, this could be cool, but at the same time, it's a TV show. It's on Fox, so I was kind of, I was pretty mixed in terms of my anticipation for Gotham. But as soon as it was getting closer to the premiere date in September, I thought to myself, okay, you know what? I will be checking this out. I'll be reviewing it episodically. But as it goes on, if it gets to really shitty level, then I might just stop. And that's the thing. It never reached that point throughout the entire season. But it never exceeded its potential. There was never a point where I said, oh my god, this show can become better in season 2. There are certain things they can do in season 2, especially that came out of this finale, which I'll talk about in a second. But okay, let's go ahead and just talk about what happened in this finale. As the ending of the last episode indicated, there's this war between Maroni and Falcone, and Gordon, Penguin, Bullock find themselves right in the middle. And I knew that Fish Mooney was going to come back into it somehow because of Jada Pinkett Smith's announcement of not wanting to return in season 2. So I'm like, okay, there's got to be something to kind of wrap things up. And sure enough, she does come back in the finale to wrap her story along, or at least that's the way it seems. And the majority of the episode deals with this war and Gordon and Bullock finding themselves in the middle of it. And the beginning finds Falcone being in the hospital after one of Maroni's men targeted him and put him there. And Penguin uses this as an opportunity to off the guy, which to me was really dumb for Penguin, because he could have just could have been in his club chilling, sipping on some drinks, just like he was at the end of last week's episode, but instead he has to go in and finish the job because of his pride. I'm like, Penguin, come on, you could be so much better than this. But at the same time, I guess that's a characteristic that makes sense for the character. So he goes in, and when he's about to kill Falcone, Gordon interrupts him, it takes him under custody, and because of this, he has to bring him along to whatever it is that they're going to do in order to put an end to this war by having Falcone be back on top. And because, like he says, he's practically the lesser of two evils, so he's in support of Falcone being back in charge to make things right. And I liked this. One of the things that I did like about this episode is how Falcone played into it, how he had a mutual understanding with Gordon throughout the entire episode, saying, hey, we are on literally complete opposite sides of the law, but we have a common goal here, so let's put everything to the side and work together. And they do that until the very end of this episode, leading to somewhat of an endearing moment between the two of them, because they have this common ground, and that is Gordon's father. And like Falcone pointed out, he had a knife in this world, and that knife was, at least I took it as a metaphor for Falcone being the knife, the metaphorical knife. And I thought that was a really cool arc throughout this episode. But then they go to this warehouse, and they get caught there by Fish Mooney, who made her return at the beginning of this episode, and meets Selina Kyle. And in 2 weeks, 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, not only do they somehow bond with each other so well that she's like, oh my god, I love this girl, but they get these really ridiculous haircuts. I was like, oh my god, really, Fish? Really? And then Selina gets her own weird haircut, and I'm like, this symbolized something that I did have an issue with throughout the entire finale, and that is these really silly, dumb, over-the-top moments. There were some moments that I'm like, oh my god, this would make much more sense if it was a legit cartoon. Batman the Animated Series didn't even have moments like this, where we had the crazy haircuts. Well, actually, maybe that did happen in the animated series. But then we had moments like when Penguin comes out on top at the very end after offing off Fish Mooney, which I saw from a mile away, not only because some person spoiled it for me on a Batman group that I follow on Facebook, so there you go. There goes. That's practically my fault for being so attentive to Facebook, but also because of Jada Pinkett Smith's announcement. She stated that she's not going to come back for season 2, so obviously they need to kill her off, or at least seemingly killed off, because she fell in the water, but, you know, this show is over at the top as it is, and it's ridiculous as it is already, so maybe she'll swim to shore. After all, she is a fish. It was a bad joke. But anyways, I feel like even though Jada said no season 2, maybe yes for season 3, should she not find any kind of liable work, you know? So maybe she'll be like, hey guys, can I come back for season 3? Should there be a season 3? And maybe that's what should be brought in after watching the show. But I honestly hope not. And here's the funny thing, even that death seemed really ridiculous. You know, she's like wounded, which by the way rendered that entire scene in that one episode where she got shot when she's taken off in the helicopter completely pointless. Alright, because here she is at the beginning of the episode walking along with her costume and her haircut and everything. I'm like, well, what was the drama with that shotgun to the abdomen? What was the whole point of that? She gets shot again at the end of this episode by Butch, who apparently got mind wiped, and she shoots both Penguin and Fish Mooney, and God knows what's gonna happen with Butch, being that Penguin uses this to his advantage and knocks Fish over the edge and down to her watery demise. Again, seemingly, but let's hope so. And again, that moment where he's on top and he's like, "I'm the king of Gotham." It was very much on par with "I'm King of the World" from Titanic. Now let's go ahead and talk about an even more anticlimactic death. Maroni, who gets killed off in this episode by Fish after he kept calling her babes so many times. It was a little bit surprising, but then after I got over that, I was like, really? Just like that he's gonna go out? This is Maroni. I stated in a couple of episodes that he was actually one of the more interesting characters, so to have him just get killed off just because he said a few too many words to Fish, again, kind of surprising at the moment, but after I had digested it, I'm like, really, guys? And this is where all hell breaks loose, and then Gordon, Falcone, and Bullock escape the warehouse and go into the shipping container where they get found out by Catwoman, all because they couldn't shut up. They're talking really loudly. I'm like, guys, be smart. Please be smart. Shut up. And that's why they get caught. And it is at this point where I noticed how many times we kept going back and forth between interiors and exteriors. Like, we were literally bouncing back and forth between locations that it started to get a little bit silly. Granted, there were some neat moments. I like Penguin going off with his gun, or Gordon having his really badass moment with those goons in the hallway fight where he's got the two guns. I'm like, okay, this is actually a really cool moment for Gordon. But things were getting even sillier and sillier. And that's not all. Interwoven throughout this entire episode is apparently some kind of therapeutic session between Barbara, who returns in this episode, and Lee Tompkins. And when we saw it the first couple of times, I was okay with it. Because one, like I said, maybe that was going to be the end of it at the time. And also, we were starting to see shades of that crazy Barbara we started to see a couple of episodes back that we didn't see in the last episode. But at the same time, it kind of makes sense because after what could have been some rather traumatizing events that happened in that last episode, it makes sense for Barbara to start cracking a little bit in this one. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're coming back to that very much more interesting Barbara because she's starting to lose it, especially after the release that the ogre basically made for her in that last episode. Because at the end of it, even though she was kind of oblivious to things, she was just like, okay, as she saw the ogre murdering her parents, I'm like, okay, maybe here she will go full-on crazy and she'll become a much more interesting character. I was just a little bummed that she was going to unleash her crazy on Lee, but at the same time it makes sense because this is the new girl. This is the new girl that Gordon is dating, so she uses her trauma as a way to get to Lee. But then when we kept cutting back to it like 3 or 4 times, I'm like, why are we coming back to this? Why is it all that important to keep cutting back? And then towards the ending of the episode, we realize why. Barbara legitimately goes off on Lee, grabs the knife, and attacks her Jack Nicholson style. I mean, she's even breaking through the door. I admit, another silly moment because look at Barbara. Okay, I'm not saying this because she's a woman. I'm saying this because she looks skinny. Okay, she doesn't look like she has that much muscle on her body. So her breaking with what I believe looked like the handle of the knife, really, I don't think that's gonna happen. But anyways, like I said, that by that point, I knew that this episode was gonna have plenty of over-the-top moments. But then Lee, again, another thing that I really liked about Lee's character is that she can hold her own. She breaks the mirror, she grabs a shard, and she fights against Barbara. You know, she, unlike Barbara, she doesn't become a damsel in distress. Sure, she tries calling Gordon, but when that doesn't work, she's like, okay, fine, I'll do things on my own. And she fights off Barbara and knocks her the fuck out. And at that point, I'm like, that would be really funny if Gordon walks in on and he walks in. And his reaction is just so nonchalant, like, yeah, that crazy bitch. So this subplot kind of turned me off at the beginning, but in my opinion, kind of redeemed itself at the very end. And in my attempt to transition from the things that I didn't like about the episode to the things that I really did enjoy about the episode that were rather nerdy and very, very interesting to us, huge Batman fans, we had two moments towards the end of the finale, rather the last 5 minutes, that even though they were short, they were very, very, very good. The first one, albeit in my opinion the better one, was the one scene that Edward Nygma was in the entire finale, which I was a little bit bummed that he was only in one scene, but it was a very crucial scene, and I'm glad that they chose it, because, man, I could watch this thing again. I'm not even kidding. I would love to watch the scene again on YouTube or something. And it is the scene in which Kringle, giving her some brains, so making her more of an appealing character, so I'm like, okay, that's cool. She finds the Nygma clue within the letter. She actually looked back at it and said, wait a minute, and confronts him about it. And he denies the whole thing, but with a very ominous tone, and even Kringle's like, okay, you know, I'm not going to think too much of it because it is Nygma, but at the same time, I don't know, I felt like she acted it very well, to where she's like second-guessing herself, and she's going to put it away for a little bit right now, but she does think that maybe something is up. And it is here where she leaves that Nygma has this breakdown, okay? It looked like he was having that when he actually did kill that officer, but here, he actually starts hearing that second voice. And those, like, you know, like spasms that he was having, they were really well done. And kudos to the actor who plays Nygma. I can't remember his name, Corey Smith something? I can't remember his name, but he does a really good job with the character, and I'm glad that they're taking this direction with Nygma. And it would be really neat if Nygma becomes at least one of the main villains in Season 2. Hell, he might even cross paths with the Penguin again, being that we did have that scene where they interact with each other earlier in the season. It would be cool that he's one of the main bad guys in Season 2, considering how much more interesting he has become. And the second slice of comic book goodness is the discovery of the Batcave by Bruce, which I remember hearing being rumored for the finale, and appropriately so. I'm like, okay, out of all the things that you could put at the very end of the finale, the introduction of the Batcave and Bruce possibly having that traumatic moment of encountering the bats and being scarred for life, transforming into Batman later, I feel like that would have been a neat ending scene for the finale. I'm like, okay, cool. And we kind of got that, but with a little bit of a twist, something to really speculate. And I'm like, okay, this is something that I think Gotham should do a bit more often, taking from rather obscure stories that have to do with Batman lore and twisting them into their own thing, which they kind of done so in the past. I mean, they were essentially doing that with the Joker, giving him an actual backstory that people are not usually accustomed to. I mean, they're not even accustomed to him having a backstory at all. But Joker might be called Jerome in this universe. And here, it's possible, and this has been in a series of comics, I believe one of the lines of comics called Batman Flashpoint has to deal with this. And that is that this is an alternate universe in which maybe Bruce's dad, Thomas Wayne, was Batman at one point. Back in the day, when he was in his prime, he was defending Gotham City. Why do I speculate this? Because he was searching his room. He felt like there was a secret there, something that his father was keeping on the wraps because of what Lucius Fox hinted him with. And after coming to that epiphany that, okay, maybe it's in this one book, he pulls it out, he turns it on, and there's some music, and I'm like, okay. Even Alfred's like, it's just a speaker. But then the passage through the fireplace, it's always the fireplace. Classic, the fireplace. Anyways, the fireplace moves to the side, and we see a secret passage, and as the camera kind of zooms out, we hear the fluttering of bats. And I think that was rather cool. It was cool that we didn't actually see the bats, but you can hear them, and you're like, oh, there it is. What's interesting, however, and I think it's kind of subtle, it's one of those things that you really need to think back to, otherwise it's going to go over your head. Even the smartest person will be like, it will not, I don't mean to sound condescending, but it's one of those things that you got to make sure doesn't go over your head. And that is the fact that this is a passage that is directly linked to the Batcave. Because in most of the stories for Batman becoming Batman when he was a kid, he would come across the Batcave by accident, practically. He would fall into it, he would walk into it as a kid, investigating what's going on, and then the bats would flutter, and he's like, oh my god, get them off me, whatever. And this would be the traumatic event that would scar him for life and make him fear bats. Here, however, it's a passageway with a trap door that was intentionally put there. Therefore, somebody was purposely going to this Batcave, or to this cave, and was sealing it off completely from the public eye. So therefore, Thomas was consciously going into the Batcave for some specific purpose. Possibly he was Batman himself. So it's interesting that Gotham might be taking this from that particular story arc in the comics, and I think it's rather interesting. It's something that we haven't seen before, or at least in live action, and I'm happy with it. It's very interesting. Like I said, we've seen the origin for Batman so many times that them taking things and making them differently, but hopefully keeping the balance between making it work and making it faithful to previous iterations, but much more obscure iterations of the Batman lore. It's very interesting, and definitely something that I'm genuinely interested to being fleshed out in Season 2. There's no other way that I can put it aside from saying that the finale was bonkers. I mean, at one point I was like, man, this is just unhinged. And at the beginning I thought it was ridiculous in a very negative way, but as it went on I got used to it, and I'm like, you know what? These over-the-top moments, I was starting to become numb to them, and one thing's for sure, the finale was entertaining from beginning to end. At the beginning it was in a bad way, and by the end I was like, okay, I'm fine with it. Still silly and over the top, but very, very entertaining. I mean, I was laughing my ass off when the fight between Lee and Barbara was going down, and the entire time you could just see Barbara going, "Rawr, rawr," like she was growling at one point. Why was she doing that? Anyways, it led to some really geeky Batman moments towards the end that I really, really did appreciate. And again, I liked how Maroni played his part in this episode, and it felt very suitable for a season finale, but ultimately it very much encompassed what Season 1 was, honestly. Like, it summarized my opinions about Season 1 as a whole, and it you know, on that merit, I guess the season finale delivered, but it really depends on how you felt about the entire season that will determine how you felt about the finale. Like, by that point, you're not going to look at the finale and be like, oh my god, the finale changed my opinion about Gotham. It really didn't. So for that, I give the season finale for Gotham, which name escapes, like All Families Are Happy or something like that. But anyways, I give the season 1 finale for Gotham a solid 7 out of 10, which is essentially what I'm giving the first season. It had some highlights, it had some good moments that I felt were very much different from what we've seen in this origin of not just Batman but also Gotham itself. But there's just so many moments where I would either question the showrunners or the writers or the directors or even the actors, like, what are you doing? And then there's other moments that break my heart because they had so much potential. So with that being said, will I be reviewing the Season 2 episodically? I think I'm going to review the premiere. And then after that, I will go ahead and just watch the season as it goes on without reviewing every single episode, because guys, this is exhausting. And when you have shows that don't deliver the way that you were expecting them to, it's kind of exhausting to set up the camera, set up the lights, get in front of the TV here, and at some points force myself to talk about something that I didn't really like, whether it be an episode that I thought was meh or an episode that had potential but they just dropped the ball completely. So because of that, I will be reviewing the Season 2 premiere, which I'm assuming is going to be coming in September. But after that, look for an entire Season 2 review by 2 years from now. Oh, 2 years from now? No, a year from now. I'm getting ahead of myself. No, about a year from now when Season 2 ends, look for a review of Season 2 in its entirety then. So let me know what you guys thought of the finale for Gotham. Plenty of people were talking about it on Facebook, and trust me, they were, because a couple of things in this episode were spoiled for me, unfortunately. But at the same time, I was like, it's Gotham. It's Gotham, so I can't get too bent out of shape for it. But please let me know what you guys thought of the season finale and what are your hopes for season 2. Until then, I'll see you guys later.